Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents My Dearest Mr. Darcy, An Amazing Journey into Love Everlasting, by Sharon Lathan, narrated by Corrie James. Prologue. Snippets of a Physician's Memoirs. June 23, 1817. Darcy House, London. Imagine my surprise to realize it has been over a month since last jotting my musings in this fine book. Of course, writing while at sea is inconceivable. Egad, I abhor being at sea. Luckily, the remedies for sea-sickness, liberally doused down my gullet by the ever-faithful Dr. Raoul Penaflor, staved off the worst of the hideous symptoms. I even managed to walk about a bit on deck. Bracing sea air, my derriere. Nonetheless, I was abed for the bulk of the trip, wallowing too far in my personal hellish misery to complain about the narrow confines of our cabin and odoriferous mattress. East India trading ships catered to the needs of cargo far above passengers. We disembarked at Ramsgate. I was quite happy to embrace the rigours of overland travel rather than proceeding up the Thames, but several days of subsequent immobility were required to restore my equilibrium ere we moved beyond that lovely sea-coast town. Raoul, bless his Spanish heart, rather delighted in my incapacitation, as it allotted him the opportunity to ramble through the streets and relish the sights. Poor man has never seen England. How does one live? I ask arrogantly. Eventually we set off. I did manage to post a letter warning William of my arrival. I hoped it would arrive well enough in advance, although that did not prove to be true. Apparently the mail service of my great country has not improved. Not all can be perfect. Oh, well, that is the way of family. I flattered myself that his astounding joy would be profound enough to overwhelm any irritation at my besieging of the newlyweds. This did prove to be true as well as fortuitous, as William had hurt himself again, and I am sure it was only my timely arrival that saved him from a life of handicap. However, I am getting ahead of myself, as you know, dear Charna, I am wont to do. This trip home has been so anticipated, sea travel notwithstanding. Naturally, I was thrilled that Raoul wished to accompany me, but even without his companionship, I would have had to come. How many hours did I bore you with memories of my homeland, Charna, always wishing and praying that you would agree to travel with me. Perhaps I should have prayed to your gods rather than my own. Ah, well, here I now am, and never has the green English countryside and crowded London streets filled me with such joy. It is almost impossible to recollect how anxious I was to leave all those decades ago. Perhaps I am getting old, as you would tease. Darcy House stood shining in the afternoon sun, undiminished in her grandeur and loveliness. Moderate chaos reigned, much to my delight, when I crossed the threshold. It was a scene evocative of my youth, when all us rowdy children would be tearing about the foyer, Alex sliding down the banister to mother's dismay, Estella hiding in order to frighten delicate Mary, and James doubled over in mirth while I performed some feat of acrobatic skill. Yes, I must be ageing, if the frequent jaunts down the ancient paths of my memories are any indication. If the obvious affection between William and his bride are evidentiary of their marital relations, then Darcy House will yet again display such a scene. In fact, they are already on the way, as Mrs. Darcy is with child. How can I describe Elizabeth Darcy? Clinically, emotionally, or both? Physically, she is a tiny slip of a girl, although actually of moderate height. Strangely, considering the stature of William, she on the one hand is dwarfed by his bulk, while simultaneously looming larger than life. Sheer force of personality and presence overcomes her physicality. With chestnut hair, enormous brown eyes, dainty features and delicate bone structure, she is a picturesque counterpart for my nephew. They complement each other well on numerous levels. However, it is the aforementioned presence that I know has captured William, as I imagine it does all who know her. She is witty, intelligent, sparkling, kind, courageous, and loving. I can readily find no faults, and you know, Jana, what a penchant I have for divining deficiencies. I will confess that I assumed William, like the vast majority of men in his class, had acquired a wife from the leeches of proper British society, someone poised, of excellent family and acceptable, but likely dull, vapid, and shallow. My years away from my favoured nephew, his character largely gleaned through James's letters and later his own, fostered the theory that he would take the safe and acceptable road. I cannot claim to have an overly intimate relationship with him, but could have stated with absolute certainty that taking such a path would have rendered him miserable within a year. James always told me that his son's intelligence and restrained intensity mildly intimidated him. William, possessing a nature far too zealous and exacting to comfortably fit within the confines of stifling English society. Yet he would lament William seemed determined to do so, even to the point of suppressing his inclinations. As I recall musing in previous journal entries while visiting home, my impressions concurred with James's. William, as an adult and master of Pemberley, appeared to be fulfilling the best of James's predictions and the worst of his fears. That he was brilliant as the estate manager and guardian to Georgie was evident, but there was a sadness and stoic quality to him that even I could not crack significantly. A mere smile or laugh was a rare event, and I think he was frankly relieved when I returned to India. Estella's letter after the wedding filled me with some hope, her impression of the new Mrs. Darcy and William's emotions all favourable. She also related that Elizabeth was neither of society nor even the best family. Lady Catherine flatly refused to acknowledge the union. Shockingly, I write with towering sarcasm. Anyway, I am repeating myself. I guess it is just the surprise of the development that still staggers me. James, of course, had married for love, but I know how rare that is. Would even my dear brother have done so if Lady Anne Fitzwilliam were not of the highest calibre and breeding? I do not know. Regardless, William has found his match in every way in Elizabeth. Theirs appears to be the deepest of loves. I cannot be happier for them. Ah, Jana, how amazing it is to be in the bosom of my family. For too many years I have been adrift with only you to really turn to. Now you are gone, and I have longed for the re-establishment of roots. Who would have thought it? And I know you are laughing from wherever you now reside. Be that as it may, I must attempt to smother my sentimental tendencies and write of my days here clinically, or I will fill the remaining pages with nonsense. My dearest Georgiana has evolved into a woman in my absence. She is more beautiful and graceful than I would have imagined her awkward and skinny little girl shape to grow into. So like Anne in every way. William's personality was always more of a melding of James and Anne, his humour and playfulness there, but reserved. More like my sister Mary or brother Philip. Actually, as I think on it, he received that trait from my mother. Interesting. Or, with further staring into space recollections, very like the old Lord Matlock, Anne's father. There was an intimidating man. I doubt he ever cracked a smile, as the world is yet in one piece. No, Georgie is a straight replica of dear Anne. Blonde, blue-eyed, dainty, soft-spoken, charming, innocent, yet with a sharp humour, intelligence, and quick wit hidden behind her naivete. It is providential that I arrived at this moment in her life. She is the proverbial girl on the cusp of womanhood, 1 hour a silly child and the next wise and mature. I am gleaning via oblique hints that William and Elizabeth walked a rocky course on their way to felicity, Georgiana the stabilizer for my nephew's turbulent soul. I do not know the details, although the curiosity is killing me. Do not snicker, Jana. I will figure it out in due time. The first several days of our dwelling have been hectic, hence why I have yet to create an entry here until today. Within days of my arrival I met Elizabeth's entire family, Lady Catherine and her daughter Miss Anne, a number of William's friends and business associates, Mr. Bingley and Miss Bingley, and my old friend Malcolm Fitzwilliam and his family. The Darcys hosted a ball that Raoul and I were in time to attend. It was marvellous to see old faces again, even Lady C. She has always been fodder for entertainment. This time it was a confrontation and subsequent dubious apology for some sort of infraction against Elizabeth. I am still working out the details, but apparently she refused to acknowledge William's marriage, basing her disdain for Elizabeth's country upbringing, as well as a misguided belief that Anne and William were destined to wed. I recall James speaking of this a time or two with humour, saying once that it would be incestuous considering how close the two were as youngsters. Be that as it may, Lady C never gave up the idea even after William made it abundantly clear his leanings were elsewhere. The boy has a mind of his own, make no mistake. Even I could have told Lady C that. Mr. Bingley has matured nicely since I met him 2 years ago, and married Elizabeth's sister Jane. Mrs. Bingley is a blonde beauty with stunning blue eyes, far quieter than Elizabeth, but well suited for Mr. Bingley. The two seem very happy, and I can only imagine how delighted all the individuals involved must feel to be so closely intertwined. Mr. Bingley's sister is a beauty as well. Striking red hair rarely seen without the accompanied poor complexion. Miss Bingley, thankfully, is not stricken with. She, however, is the quintessential product of the English ton. Always the excellent diagnostician of character, it was clear to me that Miss Bingley fancied William, and was less than pleased by him choosing Elizabeth rather than her. It was all so amusing. Of course she is the sort I expected William to end up with, and after studying all the varied interactions, I can only be thoroughly elated that William's backbone and good sense prevailed. With each passing day I am coming to admire the boy more and more. James would be so very proud of his son. Pity how those events unfolded. Elizabeth has a large family. Her mother is rather ridiculous, but her father is an interesting man. There is no doubt where Elizabeth gets her character from. We older gentlemen hit it off quite well, kindred spirits to a degree. She has 2 younger sisters, but I frankly had little time to become acquainted. The room was filled to overflowing. I am certain Darcy House has not seen such an extravaganza in years. Elizabeth was the perfect hostess, William his usual reserved self, but with a foolish grin frequently gracing his features, and eyes that lit up whenever he gazed upon his wife, which was constantly. I can remember James having much the same expression whenever he even thought of Anne. I was young enough then to tease him mercilessly about it. Now I guess I am a bit wiser, and assuredly older, so these displays of affection do not annoy me as profoundly. In truth, my heart gets all fluttery, but I would not admit that anywhere but within these pages. Still, as moving as it is, even this new sentimental me is relieved to know I was never blatantly moony every time you were nearby, Jana. Raoul charmed all the available women, and many of those who are not. That man is far too handsome for his own good, not to mention being a royal. You know that's why I call him Rajah, to his annoyance. It was requisite for me to play down his assets, so to speak, to avoid a matrimonial plot by Elizabeth's mother. I find myself curious as to what part she may have had to play in her eldest daughter's wooing such eligible bachelors. No insult intended, as both Elizabeth and Jane are excellent ladies. However, their class is clearly not equal to Darcy. Not that I ever attributed much worth to that nonsense, but it is the world we live in. Perhaps Mrs. Bennet played no part, as both men are clearly smitten with their wives, but she is the type, and I have witnessed such manipulations dozens of times. More history for me to unravel. Yes, I know, Jana. I am a busybody. Day 2 was spent in the company of Malcolm. He dragged Rajah and me to White's for an afternoon of debauchery and indolence. I recognised a few faces, but the truth is my years of studying in London did not allow for leisure time, nor was I one to overly hobnob with society. I could have participated more naturally, being a Darcy, but was looked at askance for my chosen study. I was not of the Cambridge or Oxford elite, nor did I care to be, so it created a mild stigma. No one knew quite how to deal with me, and since I was never interested in another's opinion, it was easier to avoid it all. I sensed some of the same hesitation at White's. I am still a Darcy, and in the company of Lord Matlock, so cannot be shunned. Yet I am also a mere doctor, wearing strange clothing and toting a Spaniard in my wake. I doubt even listing Rajah's pedigree would have helped. Ah, well, we had a delightful time nonetheless, the liquor as excellent as always, and the billiard-room elegant. The remainder of the evening has been lazy. The loving couple had a prior engagement, so Rajah and I stayed with the girls. George's pianoforte skills have improved dramatically since I was last here. She is quite proficient. What a shame that women cannot freely pursue careers in the arts. It has never made much sense to me that our culture expects an accomplished woman to play an array of instruments, speak and read several languages, paint and draw, be expert in all methods of needlepoint, yet do nothing with any of it beyond amuse themselves and their inner circle. I can speak several tongues, having inherited that gift from my mother, but cannot play a single instrument, cannot draw beyond vague sketches of bodily parts, and can only wield a needle when sewing flesh. Yet I am considered a more valued member of society. I personally think all men should be forced to observe a woman in childbirth. That would make them think twice about the weaker sex. Rambling again. Forgive me, my faithful journal. So here I now am reposing in my luxurious chambers at Darcy House. I am content to be home, quite delighted to be on holiday with minimal expectations on my person, not yet feeling guilty for leeching off my nephew's kindness, experiencing an odd mixture of lethargy and exuberance, sipping a fine glass of whisky, and doing nothing more laborious than putting quill to parchment, or rather steel-tipped pen to parchment. Amazing invention. William seems to have inherited a curiosity of modern innovations and mechanical gadgetry from my father. I wonder if William remembers his grandfather's obsession for science and machinery. After all, the majority of the Pemberley fountains and equipment are of his designing. I shall add that to my list of topics to discuss with my nephew. For now, staring at the fire and early to bed are the only agenda items. Good night, lovely Joanna, wherever you are. June 24, London. Spent the day trudging through the haberdasheries of Bond Street with Raoul. I am exhausted. How do the ladies do this day in and day out? Boggles the mind. Anyway, Rajah, noble instincts rising to the fore, decided he required a completely new wardrobe of the latest English fashion. So yesterday he inquires of William as to the best places to shop. William jumps up with unveiled enthusiasm, proceeding to jot down the finest establishments London has to offer. Rajah is flushed with happiness, eyeballing William's impeccably clad figure with obvious hankering. William, while ostensibly addressing Rajah, is glancing pointedly toward me and offering graciously to arrange an appointment with Mr. Renaud, his personal tailor. Elizabeth met my raised eyebrow with a barely hidden laugh. Her face is so expressive. Oddly, That particular afternoon I was wearing my most demure salwar kameez, the beige one with turquoise trim. He should be thankful I left all my dhotis behind in India. Even I did not think the English public prepared to view my legs unbound by trousers. Nevertheless, I suppose there is a logical point to my nephew's unspoken plea. All the English suits I own are woefully outdated and threadbare. I imagine there may be the occasional soirée or festivity where a proper suit will be necessary. So, alas, I did the unthinkable, and allowed Rajah to drag me from shop to shop, endured 2 hours of measuring and clucking tongues from Mr. Renault's assistants. Rajah nearly bought out each establishment. Any initial contempt expressed at his dark skin and accent rapidly evaporated by the wad of cash displayed. I, on the other hand, purchased lightly, acquiring only 4 suits and sundry accoutrements. How I will ever survive a choking cravat is frankly beyond my comprehension. Ah, the extents we will go to for love of family. June 26, London. Raoul and I reported to company headquarters, signed the obligatory documents and spoke with the director, a Mr. Allison now. He was not too pleased that we refused to give a definite date for our re-enlistment, or even if we will. Apparently Rajah's reputation has preceded him, with his services in prime demand. This thrills me, not only because I trained him, but because his skills truly are astounding, and I am delighted to see this recognized. I was a bit surprised that Rajah demurred regarding his conscription, he having not alluded to any uncertainty in his future. I chose to leave the subject alone for the moment, Raoul mature enough to make his own choices. Whatever his decisions for the future, I am confident he will do well. Met William and Colonel Fitzwilliam for luncheon and spirits at Estad Saloon. I cannot believe the eatery is still standing. I remember the first time I ate there. I was 13, still mourning Alex, and Father decided to treat me to a gentleman's outing as a way of cheering my gloominess. Additionally, he thought that I was finally capable of playing the part of a gentleman. So Pearson, James's valet, dressed me in my Sunday finery, complete with pocket-watch and fancy fob, as well as a walking stick that I dearly wanted to wave about and poke people with, but resisted the urge. The simple fear of what my father would do to me, not worth the fun I might have had. Anyway, James was in his final year at Cambridge, joining us for a few weeks while in town for the season, and I recall that I did feel vainly dashing and arrogantly mature squired about with my distinguished father and dandified older brother. I honestly do not recollect the food served, but the atmosphere was awe-inspiring to a 13-year-old. James acted all sophisticated and snobbish while winking at me when Father was not looking. Yes, fun times. Of course, I have dined at Estad's many times, although it has been a few years. Impeccable and delicious as ever. Delightful afternoon, especially as with just the 4 of us, I had my first real opportunity to communicate intimately with my nephew. We were there for hours, sipping excellent red wine from France and engaging in lively discourse. Naturally, we were approached by a dozen fellow diners who knew William. He departed the establishment with 4 additional commitments to the already busy schedule of him and Elizabeth. I only knew Lord and Lady Standish. He was a crony of James's who visited Pemberley a time or two with his wife. She was a dear friend of Anne's. We spent a few minutes reminiscing. This evening William and Elizabeth have a planned engagement at the Countess von Lieven's salon. To my incredible shock, an invitation arrived yesterday for Rajah and me. I suppose I should not be too surprised by the infamous Countess knowing all that goes on in the city. But why would she extend an invite to 2 travelling physicians is beyond my comprehension. Nevertheless, even I would be foolish to pass up an opportunity to meet the famous woman herself. So, Rajah and I will attend. June 28, London. Been a couple busy days. First, I must describe the evening at Countess von Lieven's salon. I contemplated wearing one of my new suits, but decided that if it was exotic foreign gentlemen the Countess wanted, then so be it. Yet to compromise and not embarrass my formal nephew, I wore my finest chawani of grey wool. I figured that if it was acceptable for official British East India Company affairs, then it should serve. I even topped it off with matching fez, quite dashing, if I say so myself. I know you would have appreciated it, Johanna, as it was the outfit you gifted to me on my 50th birthday. Of course, I do think it was primarily out of your desire to see me properly attired for one of your father's ceremonies. I digress, however. The Leven mansion on St. James's Place was stupendous, as expected. All the lights were lit, some, to my astonishment, created with gaslight. The glow was incredible. The entire square lit as if noontime. Even though it was well after the dinner hour, the square was bustling with nearly every house plainly hosting some soirée or ball. The ambassador's dwelling was no exception. The door was standing open with footmen checking invitations as folks freely walked in and out. Music and laughter from within was audible without. It was so hectic and boisterous that I find it difficult to describe with any clarity. The whole concept of salons, as popularized by the forward French women with designs of intellectual conversation amongst artists and philosophers, has evolved with the Countess into a place to influence political matters. Much of the former reigned here, as the evening's guests included writers, William Wordsworth, Percy Bysshe Shelley and Leigh Hunt, and artists John Constable and J.M.W. Turner, among others, I did not have a chance to meet or was unfamiliar with. Elizabeth gravitated to the artists, clearly enamoured by Mr. Wordsworth and Mr. Constable. The latter especially, as apparently she and William have recently viewed an exhibition of his works, purchasing 2 paintings. I confess with shame that I was astonished at how easily Elizabeth mingled with the plethora of dignitaries and their wives. As I have written, I am delighted with William's felicity and good sense to marry a woman of true value. Nonetheless, aware of Elizabeth's provincial upbringing, and having had minimal opportunity thus far to talk to her seriously, I did not quite fathom how intelligent she is. Clearly William was somewhat surprised as well. Even from his perch across the room, while discussing politics with several members of Parliament, including Earl Charles Grey and George Canning, would love to have been privy to that discussion. I noted his eyes often on his engaging wife with immense pride but mild amazement. I guess I can read William so easily, as his face is so like my father's, and mine to a great extent. Quite uncanny to view another who is nearly a mirror image. But I am digressing yet again. Elizabeth did not appear the slightest bit nervous. Perhaps that is innocence to a degree, but she conducted herself with a confidence and poise marvellous to witness. I rarely had the opportunity to join into the conversation surrounding her, my own attention captured, as I will relate in a moment, but it was obvious that the people around her, both male and female, were favourably inclined. Her manners were impeccable as far as I could discern, not that I am a very good judge of proper English behaviour, God knows. Still, William never seemed dismayed in any way, as I am sure he would have been if there was cause. My nephew, for all his numerous excellent qualities, is still one who keeps a tight rein on propriety and social class. Poor boy. Roger and I found ourselves chatting part of the evening with a group of East India traders and directors. Talking shop, so to speak. The politics behind the company never fails to make me yawn, but I suppose I do have some insight, having served for nearly 30 years. Some of the politicians in the Assembly joined in, even William for a spell, as he, like most wealthy Englishmen, holds stock in the company. As a physician, I never have paid much attention to the trading aspects, although I too have invested monetarily. However, as long as the revenues roll in, I really do not care how. Roger argues with me endlessly as to my lackadaisical attitude, to which I counter that if I desired to be a businessman, I would have stayed home and assisted in the management of Pemberley, as my father wished. So there. The truth is that any Englishman worth his salt can talk politics and business, after discussing fine spirits and food, that is. It is in the blood, apparently.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?